everyone. My name is Katie George. I'm the manager of Arts Education Programs here at the Pittsburgh Cultural Trust. Welcome to the Trust Arts Education Center, and thank you for joining us for Creative Conversations, where you get the inside scoop on the PNC Broadway and Pittsburgh series. I am pleased to introduce to you our host for today, Michael Mara.
Thank you, Kaylee. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you guys for being here as well. I had some history with this show. I performed in the show on Broadway, and I also did the third national tour. I performed as the Bishop of Dean, as well as the student Legley, and I also had the understudy role of Thénardier, which I had glorious 70 performances under my belt. So when I was asked, do you want to host this? I said, yeah, I love Les Mis. But then I heard it had been reinvented. And I'd been asked in the past, do you want to see the show? It's like, I kind of like my memories the way they were. And I couldn't see how they could do it without the turntable and the barricades. And I thought, oh, all right. But then they asked me to do it. And then they said, hey, you want free tickets to the show? And free tickets to the show. I said, yes, let's go see it. And I brought my wife and my two kids as well to see the show. Because I thought, they should see the show where I talk about all the time. But they didn't see the show I did. But I have to tell you, I thought, maybe this new show, it's going to be watered down. They're just milking the cow. They're just making money off their past laurels. I was wrong. This show is amazing, and I really want to talk about the reinvention of it, and I want to get to our guests here. So let's introduce them. We have one of the cast members. Actually, she's many cast members, and we'll talk about that in a minute. She's the female swing, Ashley Dawn Mortensen.
Hi.
And we are also joined by the resident director of the tour, Mr. Richard Barth.
Hi.
So I want to start with Richard. I don't know what a resident director does. When I was out there, we didn't have a resident director. So can you tell us a little about what you do?
Sure. So I'm in charge of maintaining the artistic vision of our directors, Lawrence Connor and James Powell. And then we also have an associate director whose name is Corey Agnew, and so he's my immediate supervisor. And so between the two of us, we maintain the show on the road. Basically, it's kind of taking some of what would be production stage manager's duties, and then I take on a lot of those things artistically. Yeah.
Okay, so you travel with the tour constantly then? You
I do,
don't
yeah.
Just come out and visit. You're
Yeah.
always with the tour, and you're always doing stuff.
Correct.
So I know you guys had a rehearsal today that we were just talking about. They just ran here from rehearsal, then they're going to run to do the show. So we got to keep a tight schedule. But what were you guys doing today at rehearsal?
We had a put-in for 7 principal understudies and then a number of featured ensemble roles. And so to accomplish that, we end up in a sort of split track abbreviated show where we only have 3 male ensemble swings and 2 female ensemble swings. So then to take 9 people who are typically in the ensemble and put them into principal roles for the rehearsal requires a lot of split tracking and moving around for our swings. And then also to accommodate that situation, I just sort of tell people I thank you in advance for doing some of your regular ensemble track, even though you're being put into, say, Cosette or Marius or Andras. So we fill out the stage in places like Thénardier's Inn and that type of thing. And so today at the rehearsal, because the new principals, 7 of the 9 were being put in, were in costume. So in Thénardier's Inn, we had Marius and Andras in costume and a recently passed Fantine and that type of thing. So, but it works. It gets everybody prepared and ready to be in. And this evening, if you're seeing the show, you'll actually see local actor Dan Bittner will be on for Andras this evening because our regular Andras has a personal day. So,
wow, I think he's from Shaler. I think he went to Shaler.
Okay, yeah. He went to Carnegie Mellon for sure,
Right.
and he grew up, I think, on the north side, he said.
Yeah.
I told him that I keep seeing people that I think are related to him, but yeah.
We're all connected
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
So speaking of backstage and things, tell people what you do, Ashley.
So I'm a swing, and a swing is somebody that covers, so I am the understudy for all of the ensemble, essentially. So we have 8 women in the show, and I cover all of them. So if any of them are out for a personal day or sick or on for one of their principal covers, then I go on for that track. There are 2 of us, so same thing with the men. There are 2 female swings and 3 male swings. And so say if the 2 female swings, say if there are 4 women out of the show that night, that means Nicole and I are doing the work of 4 people with 2 people. So that's when Richard was talking about doing a split track, that's what that would mean. Nicole and I, as 2 people, would cover 4 different people. So our dance captain and our resident director would get together and decide which of those tracks can be consolidated, which can be cut. So Nicole and I aren't running around like complete insane people, just a little bit, that's fine. There was one time in a version of the show, I think I did all of the solos in the factory at one point on Broadway in New York. It was just me standing behind the table doing every single, except for one. There was one solo that I didn't do. So that's very consolidated version of kind of what a swing is.
So can you explain to us what a track is?
Yes.
What that means?
So it truly is like a train is on a track, right? Like, so every actor in the show has a specific spot they have to be at a certain time. So they have to get to point A to point B. And who they come across, what other tracks, what other trains cross them, you kind of have to be aware of that. So say if I am Emily, I'm the track of Emily, and she has a coupled featured kind of things in the show, I know exactly when she crossed the stage, who she interacts with, what her featured roles are, what her backstage traffic is like, and so I can then go on and do her track exactly how she does it with a little leeway. The kind of nice thing about Les Mis is because it is such an ensemble piece, there is a lot more wiggle room. There is a lot more of that kind of collective feel to it. So as a swing, there are definitely pieces that you have to be very aware of, like the big run-on at the end of Act 1. That is terrifying as a swing to go on for the first time in, because it's truly just 20 people running like this at each other. But I would then know, okay, I'm on for Emily, so I have tons of videos in my phone, and I have tons of what we call track sheets, and I have every single thing that she does and every single person that she crosses with. So when I do go on for At the One Day More, I know, well, I'm upstage of Dan, and I'm downstage of Andrew, and I come through here, and I land upstage of Julia. So it's a lot of things in your brain that
That's
you're
what I'm
constantly
getting at.
moving
So
around.
how many costume changes does one character do?
Oh gosh, I mean,
on average.
For the women, it's not as much as the men. We do most of our changes in the first 30 minutes of the show, and it's 1, 2, 5, 6, about 6, ish, and then we kind of stay in one costume for a good chunk of the show, pretty much for the middle hour and a half through the end, up until the wedding is when we change again.
Oh, wow.
So it's
So you have to remember all of those costume changes for each individual character, as well as each individual vocal lines,
Yeah.
as well as each individual's blocking.
yeah. So we do also have to know all the soprano, alto, mezzo for each of the tracks as well. But eventually, and sometimes you get swung on mid-show. That's already happened to me twice. And then the couple of the times that we've been out on the road, where you get our stage manager comes over the comms and goes, "All right, Ashley, please be ready in your costume in the next 5 minutes. We hope you're on for One Day More." He's much more official than that, but so then I go, okay, I'm in the dressing room and I go, okay, and I have gotten very fast at putting pin curls in. I can do it in under 90 seconds.
Wow.
There's so many people that come to help you in that kind of scenario, right? You have the stage manager that comes and checks in on you and says, "Ashley, do you need anything?" You have the costume department that comes in and says, "Here is your costume." You have the microphone department that comes in and makes sure that your microphone, so everyone just kind of jumps in action in a situation like that. And usually it's just because someone got sick mid-show or someone got injured, and I've done the show for a very long time, so it's not, you kind of have to be very calm under pressure. The last thing you want to be as a swing is somebody that panics, because you're going to make everyone else panic, and it also just doesn't serve the show. Even if you're in the wrong spot, no one else would know, as long as your confidence gets you very far.
Right. So these are the things you don't know, but swings are some of the most talented people in the world. You have to be a special kind of person to keep all that organized in your head and stay under the pressure and do that. So I give her a lot of credit, as well as understudies as well. They have to be ready to go on a moment's notice, sometimes in the middle of a show. I myself walked out of the Thénardier Inn one day because I had food poisoning. And I don't want to tell you what happened backstage, but who I notified my understudy ahead of time so that and they were ready to go on a moment's notice. Because I thought, I'll be all right, but some doesn't feel right, and sure enough. And stuff like that happens, but you don't even I believe, were there understudies on last night?
Yes.
We had a Marius understudy on. Chris Tamayo was on last night. It was his second time on.
Amazing.
He's doing an incredible job.
Right, I had no idea in my program. Normally, they used to put, in my day, they used to put inserts in the program that said so-and-so is on for so-and-so, but I guess it was out front.
It's in the lobby.
Yeah.
And it said that, and I had no idea. So understudies, I always love to see understudies go on because their energy is always up, because they don't get to do it all the time, and it's very exciting. So I like to talk about that. Something else crossed my mind. Well, let's talk about the reinvention.
Sure.
Has a majority of people seen the old version? I call it the old version with the turntable and the barricades and minimal staging otherwise, just tables, chairs, things like that. Well, this new invention, when did it come to be? When did it start?
There was a UK tour in, I believe, 2009 that was celebrating the 25th anniversary of the show. And then the first production of it in the States was in 2010 at Paper Mill Playhouse. I was in that version as a swing. We started rehearsal on October 7th, 2010. That date just sticks with me. And then we ran at Paper Mill until the end of that year, and then we went on tour for like a little over 2.5 years. And that was the North American tour. And then we did that production in Toronto. I was a swing on that as well, and then that was the production that then played Broadway starting in 2014. And I wasn't initially offered the Broadway company, but then 9 days before the Tony Awards, they called me, and they called me on a Friday morning, and I started that night. And then I was in the show the following Thursday with no rehearsal because it was the week of the Tony Awards and there's not time for any. And so I got to make my Broadway debut that Thursday, and I got to sing the first solo line of the show, which was super cool. And then got to be on the Tony Awards on Sunday.
Nice.
That's such a cool story.
Is it?
Yeah.
The life in the theater. Oh, that is so cool.
Yeah.
So then I know you got shut down.
Yeah, then the Broadway production ended in 2016. Ashley was a part of that as well, and then this a tour went out in 2017, and then we were shut down on March 13th or 12th or whenever, around the same time things shut down for COVID. We were in Durham, North Carolina. And sent home for a few weeks, like everybody was. So.
And the
Which
weeks
kept getting
left.
extended.
Years and years and
Yeah.
years. And so you brought the tour back. Now, did a lot of cast members come back from
We have
that?
a few returning cast members. There are six of us?
I think so.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, about
Yeah.
6 of us that are returning.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's
Okay.
a couple.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you started in Cleveland.
We
Yeah.
did.
And they survived Cleveland. And
Yeah.
then where else have you played so far?
Just Philly, Cleveland to
and
Philly.
Providence.
Yeah, Cleveland
Cleveland
to
to
Philly
Philly
to
to
Providence to here. So yeah.
Yeah.
So we're still pretty fresh and new. The rehearsal today, the put-in today, was our. We don't enumerate understudies in the show, so we refer to them as the first to be rehearsed and second to be rehearsed. It's not. We don't. So today was our second to be rehearsed group of understudies. So we're still new enough that we were just having a put-in today to get those folks into the show. So
Right.
yeah.
So when you go into a different theater,
Yep.
there are things you have to deal with. Have you played the Fisher Theater in Detroit yet?
Yes.
Yeah.
There
And we're
are
heading
things you
there.
have to deal with.
We haven't played it on this tour, but I've
Okay,
played
you
it
played
on.
it
Yeah,
before.
yeah, yeah.
Before.
There's no
Yeah.
offstage space.
No.
All the dressing rooms are downstairs.
Yeah,
If
you're-
you need
you're
to get to the
climbing
stage, you have to
stairs.
run down the steps, run under the stairs,
Yeah.
and back up again. It's not an easy. You get exercise in that theater.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
what do you do? Because I saw the show last night. There seems to be a lot of scenery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that take up a lot of room? Stage left and stage right?
It does. I mean, our crew is remarkable. I don't know how tours usually work. You load out the show. Well, the crew loads out the show Sunday night. As the show is kind of, as sets don't need to be used anymore, they're kind of taken off the stage, and costumes that don't be used anymore start to get put away because they've gotten it down to how many hours now?
It's essentially an 8-hour loadout
Yeah.
and
Wow.
a 16-hour
Load
load
in.
in. So
So our crew has just gotten, it's tough, and they work long hours till very early in the morning, or very early in the morning, and start very early in the morning on Tuesday, because we have to open the show Tuesday night. So they're usually done by around, like 1 in the afternoon on Tuesday?
it depends.
It depends
Yeah,
on-
it
and it
depends.
depends on the theater.
They're typically still doing like lighting focus around like 5 o'clock, 4 or 5 o'clock. And we came down, at 9:30 in
Yeah, in
Providence?
Providence.
So we came down at 9:30 in Providence on Sunday. And we opened last night, or curtain went up at 7:30 here last night. So it's remarkable. And it's 11 tractor
11, yeah.
trailers.
I was going to say how
Yeah,
many.
it's-
We
it's-
only had
tractor
8.
trailers.
on the
Yeah,
Darius
it's
company.
11. It's 11 tractor trailers.
And depending on the theater too, some stuff is flown above, and some stuff can be stored on the deck. So in this house, the backstage is huge.
Right.
Providence, it's very, very small. The crossover, what we call like the space between the back curtain of our set and what we call Gondola Village, is where we get dressed, was maybe from this TV to this line here in Providence. Here, and it's huge. It's a huge backstage.
You could drive a car.
A truck through it.
Yeah.
So you just kind of
Yeah.
make do, and everyone, when the wardrobe gets there, and when everyone gets there, they kind of decide where everything's going to go, and then we have a company meeting. So yesterday, we had a company meeting before the show, before we do our sound check, where they say, like, here's where Gondola Village is. Richard will get up and say every city has a different kind of eyeline focus for certain songs. One Day More, the docks where certain people have to look, and usually there's like a row of exit signs, or Richard will say, this city there are sconces, right?
Yeah.
For this one.
Somebody said, "What's a sconce?"
Someone did. That's what a sconce was. That's why I remember that you
Yeah,
said
yeah.
sconces. Anyway, so every city is different, and it's our crew and our creative team that's going to be like, okay, here's how we deal with this new city. Here's what you need to look for, and they'll remind you to make sure. And something that I always remind myself as a swing is make sure you look at these things before you're going on for them. Right? Like as an actor, you want to make sure, just even in a regular ensemble track, even if you're in the show every night, when you get to a new city, explore the backstage. Make sure you know where your sets, where your props are, and where you're going to do your costume changes. And as a swing, too, I always like to go and check it out, because if I do get swung on mid-show, I don't want to be like a chicken with its head cut off and running around and having that be an extra element of stress. It just makes everyone else's life easier.
Yeah, there was one time I was doing Thenardier, and the old turntable used to have a pop-up where if there was a trap, they would pop out of the stage and da-da-da-da-da and then disappear again. Well, if you didn't know your way to get to that trap, you could get lost under that stage really easily.
Yeah.
You'd hear somebody singing, but you wouldn't see them.
Yeah, yeah,
I
right.
can't find my...
We
Anyway.
also, I just want to jump in and say, like, when it comes to these people who are kind of like road warriors who've been doing this for a long time, when we were in Providence, our production stage manager, Jack McLeod, the wall tags are backstage where like shows that have come through paint the walls, and he's on 22 of them.
Holy cow.
So when you talk about like getting into these venues and stuff, I mean,
Veterans.
just like total road veterans, and we have some experience with that. And I can say, like, I'll tell the story now and again where I'll be like, oh, we came through here in 2003 when I was on Miss Saigon, and then of course somebody in our ensemble today is like, I was 2, you know.
There's a lot of them.
Yeah, but some folks that are on the road with us seriously have played these venues. I mean,
Many,
dozens,
many
if not
times, yeah.
20
Speaking
sometimes.
of going into different cities, do you hire local musicians and stagehands?
We hire local stagehands
Okay.
in every city, and depending on the city, we have the luxury of having an orchestra that travels with us. That's something that Cameron McIntosh, our producer, insists upon. But there are cities that we go into where we do longer stays, where like in Detroit, we'll have a local orchestra. So it'll still be our 2 keyboard players, our violinist, our percussionist, and then of course our conductor. But then the other instruments are filled out with local musicians. So that happens in like Detroit, Chicago, Los Angeles, DC, some of the cities where we are for a longer period of time. And oftentimes that also has to do with like local union regulations.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's great when a tour comes to town because local people actually get to work.
Absolutely.
So it's
Absolutely.
amazing.
Yeah. Some of the folks in Cleveland were saying like they had never done a show call before. They were like rock and roll stagehands, you know?
Oh, wow.
And so we teched there, and so they were like, yeah, this is great. Like I'm learning a whole new side of the business, a whole new skill set. And then we were there for 5 weeks, and our stagehands had been there 3 weeks before we got there, for load in and everything else. So yeah, it's pretty cool, and you get to know cool folks, and yeah.
So let's talk the reinvention a little bit.
Sure.
I noticed a lot of new technology.
Yeah.
Where I said the previous version that I did was very sparse. And it's like you'd have a table or a chair, and it'd be popped on and rotate around on the. Oh yes.
Just real quick, I have some terrible news that Richard and Ashley have to get backstage.
What?
It's their call time, I know. But we still have a little
I've
bit more
got
time.
questions.
I know.
What do we? Can we say like 4 more minutes?
Yeah,
Yes.
we
Is
can
that
go
acceptable?
longer.
If you're
It's
okay
fine.
with that.
Yeah,
Okay.
because my phone hasn't gone off, right?
No.
Okay,
Then we're
great.
good.
That's
So
good.
far.
We're good.
The bat phone's not
What
on.
would happen is like if somebody's calling out of the show, the PSM is getting a hold of me to find out like what coverage would be. But seems like we're fine, and that also means Ashley's not going to be in the show, and
5 minutes.
yeah.
Sorry.
See, these are the things you don't know.
Yeah.
Aren't you glad you're here for this?
Yeah.
So let's talk real quick reinvention.
Sure.
I noticed projections.
Yeah.
Are there hydraulics as well? I noticed that I think you build the stage on top of the other stage.
We do. We have a
Okay.
deck that travels with us.
Okay.
And then we have automation. We have motors, automation.
That's what I meant. Yeah.
There are some hydraulics involved in the braking systems on the staircase units.
Yeah.
And then, the projectors, and we even got new projectors on this tour. There are 3 projectors across the back wall, 3 or 4? 3? 4. 3. And then there's one out front. And we actually now have laser projectors.
Really?
Yeah, so
I
all
want
of
to do backstage tour.
yeah,
Can
so
I come
all
back
the
with you?
you can't
COVID.
because of COVID.
COVID.
Yeah,
That used to be the coolest thing we could do.
Backstage tours.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
You
yeah.
don't do that anymore.
But so that technology, of course, didn't exist.
No.
Right.
When the turntable version happened, but it is really cool because it essentially provides that movement that the turntable did. So when Valjean starts to sing "The Day Begins" and "Now Let's See," the projection in the back starts to move, and that's always like a as I'm teaching Valjean to people, I'm like, you have to start moving on that because you need to be moving this way as the projection moves this way, you know. But so it essentially provides that type of movement that the turntable did, but just in a different way.
Right. I noticed when the students are marching through the streets,
Yeah.
They're marching through
it
it.
looks like it's moving behind them. It is
Yeah.
so cool. And then
Yeah.
I don't want to spoil it too much, but the sewers are cool.
Yeah.
And the last time you see Javert on stage is amazing.
Yeah.
My son was with me, and we both went, "That was cool." So I don't want to say too much, but
And the-
it
And to-
is
oh,
really
go ahead.
cool.
Oh, no,
Go
no.
ahead,
No,
go
a
ahead.
lot of the projections too are original Victor Hugo
That's what I was
artwork.
just about to say. Yeah.
Oh,
I got
I
you.
Yeah.
felt like I was looking at painting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he didn't, it wasn't something that he wanted made public while he was alive, is what we've been told, because he wanted people to focus on his writing. But he did all this chalk work and painting, and those have been adapted to be used as our projections. So you're sort of enveloped by Victor Hugo's, thoughts and brain.
They do look like paintings. The farm
Yeah.
labor scene.
Yeah.
It's like I feel like I just walked into like an piece of art. It
Yeah.
was so gorgeous.
The other thing to note is because we had a whole team, of course, you have a whole team for every department, but we had a projection team, When we were in Cleveland at one point, from out of town, we had 151 people in Cleveland to get this show on its feet. Wow. And that's not counting like local stagehands and so on and so forth. But at one point, company management had 151 people from all around the globe there there, and the theater essentially looks almost like a NASA launch room. I mean, it's crazy.
Wow.
So yeah, it's quite cool. It's an impressive,
And did
it's an
I
impressive
see
piece of work.
live fire on
Yeah,
stage?
yeah, there was live fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anytime you see any flame, it's live.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I was
So-
like going, ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have to have a fire marshal come when we come into a new city, and
Really?
he has to check
Yeah.
everything.
Oh, the things you got to check over. Wow.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And I was surprised. There was a barricade.
Yeah.
And I thought, how are they going to make a barricade? There
Yeah.
it was. And it was
Yeah.
great. And I noticed some of the blockings changed because of they can't turn around anymore. But
Sure.
when Gavroche has his final moment,
Yeah.
it's going to rip your heart out. Has
Yeah.
anyone seen the show already? And who's
Yeah.
going to be seeing the show? Oh, you're
Cool.
in for a treat, I
Yeah.
swear. Is there anything else you guys want to say before you leave?
No, I
No.
don't think so.
Usually it's come see the show.
Yeah,
We're here
come
this
see
date
it,
to
but you
this
already
date,
are
but you're
gonna
coming
come
to
see
see
it,
the
and
show.
you've already
So
seen
yeah,
it, and that's wonderful.
I know.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so great to have you guys here.
Thanks for having us.
it's our pleasure.
Yeah.
I don't know what else to ask you right now. Does anybody have any quick questions?
Yeah, while you guys
Yeah.
head over, we have some time for some Q&A. So if anybody has any questions, that
Well, they're
Mike
gonna ask
can
me.
answer. Yeah, we can
Yeah.
answer some questions.
I grew up in Rhode Island and been to PPAC many times, and I was just curious, do you find a difference in audience city to city, or is it more of a night-to-night thing as far as how you might react to something unexpected? And it seems like the shows here in Pittsburgh sell a little bit better, like as far as, ticket sales, but I was
Yeah.
just curious.
Yeah.
if
Yeah,
you
I
could
mean,
comment.
there definitely is a difference. I mean, I think it's both. It's city to city and it's night to night. I will say, Philly, I feel like everyone in Philly who is not a Phillies fan is coming to see Les Mis. That's what it feels like. When that curtain goes down in Philly, it's as if they're at a football game, or it's kind
You're
of
selling
remarkable.
out, right? I mean,
Yeah,
you're
we're
still
sold out, but it's same
after
thing in
this many
Pittsburgh.
years, you're still
Yeah,
70
like the
million
lights-
people have seen this show, and they're still selling it out.
Yeah, the lights went down last night, and again, huge uproar here.
Yeah.
So it truly, it is, every once in a while you get like a sleepier city, but it doesn't mean, we always say, it's like, that doesn't mean they're not enjoying it. It just means that sometimes too, it's a collective thing. You hear one person cheering next to you and you get infected with it, and you also want to cheer. So yeah, it truly is kind of a city to city, night by night thing. It's a little bit of both, but it is really, really cool when they treat it like a rock concert. And it happens, and backstage, it just makes everything so much more alive. Just, that's really, really cool. So take note, treat it like a rock concert.
Treat it like a rock
Go see
concert.
it. Get everybody involved. Yeah.
All right, and I think we have time for one more if anybody else has a question.
She does
Up
right
front
here.
here.
Oh, right up here.
Perfect.
I was just wondering what the audition process was like.
Oh, mine's a little different because I joined the Broadway company, kind of similar to a Richard situation, but I'd never done the show before. I joined with 2 days of rehearsal, and then I was in it. That's a story for another time. But I had been in a few times for the show. I know a lot of people for this revised version, this new old tour. Some people started audition process in like January. We have a lot of younger, I call them kids. We have a lot of younger people in our show, and they were like fresh out of college, so they were auditioned in January. We have some people, I know some of the returnees auditioned in like April of this past year. And you kind of do your ensemble stuff if you're an understudy, and then you do your understudy material. And it can be anywhere. I know some people that have had, as a returnee, you get like 2 auditions because they kind of know your work. And then you have some people like our Valjean, who's a returnee, and he, went back in 3 or 4 times. Just so they can see what you're like with a Javert. They can see what you're like, your chemistry in that way. For the principals, it's a little different because they want to make sure that everyone kind of meshes really well together because it is such a community piece, right? It is such an ensemble show. Yeah, so that's very quickly what it's like, and it varies person to person and role to role. But usually all the auditions happen in New York City. And you get the creatives to come in, and then usually the final audition, especially for principals, that's when Cameron McIntosh comes in and makes like the final call. They also put a lot of them on tape now, and we'll send them off to Cameron or Cameron's team. And then they watch them and say yes or no, and then you go back to the audition room if they say no. So it just depends, yeah.
All right, I think that's all the time we have. So thank you,
Thanks.
Michael,
Yeah,
Ashley.
Thank you,
Richard.
Richard and Ashley.
Thanks.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for bringing the show to Pittsburgh. Thank you.